Welcome back to Normalized PTSD. Today we have Mike Coe. Got in contact with Mike Coe because I was talking to a group about what improved their quality of life with PTSD, and they mentioned leadership embodiment. I didn't have much understanding of what that was or what that meant, but reached out and was in contact with Mike Coe, and I feel like he did an outstanding job breaking down what leadership embodiment at a really basic level is. And if there's interest in this, then I will reach out and try to find more information on that. Without anything else, hope you guys enjoy.
Awesome. Today we're meeting with Mike Coe, and we're going to discuss leadership embodiment. I dove into this a little bit, trying to get a better understanding of it, but I'd rather have someone with the experience articulate what is leadership embodiment. Thanks for joining me.
Absolutely, Jonathan. Thank you for having me. And so we can jump right in and leadership embodiment. So I actually have my own business working as a coach, coaching veterans, military, and spouses who are coming out of the military, transitioning to civilian life. And as part of that work, one of the foundational pieces of the coaching that I offer is leadership embodiment. And some of the ideas with leadership embodiment is that how we stand, sit, and walk shapes the way that we engage with the world. So if our shoulders are curled in and we're hunched over and like slouched down and our hands are up under the keyboard, like that can impact how we are. Are we tight and constricted, or are we more upright and open, and gives us a lot more possibilities for action? And an easy way to try that is like if you just really crunch yourself up and get real tight and as rigid as you can, and then try and go down and bend and tie your shoes. It's hard because there's so much tightness and constriction. Whereas if you can just, like how you probably normally a person normally would, and just go down and tie your shoes, and it's a lot easier to do it. There's a lot more freedom of movement.
Right.
And that another big idea is that idea of ease. What we want to do is the offer is that if we, with leadership embodiment, is that can we invite in a little bit more ease. And we also want, with leadership embodiment, we want individuals to learn and understand how they respond under pressure or stress.
Right.
And without being aware of how we are under pressure or stress, again, because pressure, when we get pushed on, we tend to have some sort of a response that creates tension. We get pressure or stress, and it invokes some sort of response in us that it tightens and creates that tension.
Right. There's something I saw in one of the videos, and it's talking about one of those, and it's center under pressure, I believe. And it really stood out to me because I find that, I don't know, pretty important, especially like I think long-term idea. I like to explore like how to get the warrior mind, because I feel like some people are able, in my experience, to deal well under pressure, like they're able to detach from the situation emotionally and be present in the moment. And I think it'd be a really cool way to teach that. And it kind of seems like you guys are doing that a little bit.
Yeah, we are. In fact, and what you just said, I think an important distinction is that some people are really good at being under pressure, in that, and they can take action in that they're absorbing all of the stuff that's coming at them, and they're still able to take action. And with leadership embodiment, it's less about it's more about, can we let the pressure and the stress go by us and not actually impact us? Because if it impacts us, it lands in us and on us. If we don't get rid of it, it's going to come back on us at some point down the road. It's going to get stuck.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No,
It
go ahead.
reminds me a little bit of kind of like meditation. When you have ideas, not letting those ideas hit you, not letting them emotionally impact you in a negative way. You're aware of them, but you are present in the moment with the task at hand. I don't know. That's kind of what resonated with me while you were talking.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, meditation is part of, we use meditation in leadership embodiment. And I also use that with pretty much all my clients. It's exactly that. It's like, oh, we're getting pushed, we're getting pressure. We've got a thought, because it operates the same way. Someone walking towards us with a request or sending us an email, it's something that's coming at us that's asking for our attention, just like a thought is. A thought is asking for us to pay attention to it. And so can we let the thought go by? Can we let it sail on by? Which is, it's a practice, which is another part of leadership embodiment. It's like, nobody just gets in a car. Well, I can't say nobody.
Right.
Almost nobody gets in a car at the age of 16, 17, 18, or however old they are when they first learn how to drive and knows how to drive well. It just doesn't work that way. It takes time and practice with sitting behind the wheel to remember, like, oh, I got to put my seatbelt on and check my mirrors and hands at 10 and 2. And now, I'm in my 40s now. I just get in the car and go, because all that stuff, it's all been embodied. It's now in me. I don't have to think about it anymore.
Right. And by embody, it kind of sounds like it's like a learned pattern, maybe. Like, I don't know. I feel like patterns, we can learn them, and sometimes they can be really good and beneficial, and sometimes they can be really bad.
Yes, it's that leads right into another point, is that in this work, we talk about that there's two types of operating systems. For every human has two types of their brain has two types of operating systems, and everybody has these two. And the first one is what in leadership embodiment they call it personality. I call it pattern. That's the constriction, the tightness, the self-judgment, the I'm a piece of crap, the inner critic, any of that is pattern, and then, or personality. On the other side of the other operating system that we want to invite more of is the centered operating system. That's the operating system of abundance, of flow, of ease, of being in the zone. And so with these practices, we can catch ourselves when we're in the pattern operating system and make it a choice to say, I'd like to move from the centered operating system instead.
I think it would be, for me, first, I would have to identify that. So are there any practices or tips identifying like which operating system's running?
Yeah, absolutely. The part of it is, there's a couple different ways to tell. One is learning to getting to know the body a little bit, the individual getting to know their body a little bit more, and by starting to notice if they're feeling pressure or tightness or tension as the result of something that happened in their life. It could be something from outside, an outside person or event, or it could be a thought. And then, so that's one way, is to start to notice, am I feeling tight or tension in my body? If there's that tightness and that tension, we're in that pattern operating system. If there's more of a feeling of flow and ease, that's more of the centered operating system. And so it's a practice of getting to know what that feels like in the body. It can also be thoughts, generally, or thoughts and emotions. Generally, if someone is angry or sad for extended periods of time, not even extended periods of time, if somebody is angry in the present day, there's a 99% chance they're in their pattern, and they're actually operating from in response to something in their past. They're not actually mad at the current situation. They're mad at something else, and they're in their pattern. That's a pretty straightforward one that some people well, I don't know. Some people it surprises them and that's true. And others are like, yeah, that makes sense. So,
Right. I definitely notice with myself if I'm not feeling great, it's usually because I'm dwelling on some past things that I've done, whether it be recent things or like historical things.
yeah,
Uh,
right. And it's a completely normal human thing. Is I want to be clear is there's no right or wrong with anything that I'm talking about. I present it as there's a way that it's easier and there's a way that it's harder. And so why not choose the way that's easier, the way of centering, the centered operating system, as opposed to being in the pattern. It's just it's harder. It makes life harder.
so are there any techniques or exercises that you teach or suggest to help people learn their bodies a little bit? I find a lot of people who are struggling don't realize they're struggling. They just think that that's normal. Like this is the normal state of being. And it's like, well, at least for me, I just thought after war, like I was a cranky, you know, bitter person because of war. And I was like, oh, I can improve the quality of my life and improve this situation.
Yes, 100%. And so a couple things with that. I'll get to the practices I'll get to a practice in just a second. And I want to say that part of that problem that I see that you just described is that the culture of the military of being tough and self-sufficient and push through and embrace the suck as examples. And there's many
Mhm.
other sayings I'm sure that we've both heard during our time in the Air Force, that that mindset is like, oh, there's also sometimes there can be some perfectionism in there. At least for me, there was. And so with that mindset, it creates this environment where it's like, shit, I must be the only one. Like
Mhm.
there's nobody else that's dealing with this stuff that I'm dealing with. And the reality is, because I had PTSD as well. And the reality is that the experiences of emotions and post-traumatic stress are the mechanisms and the way that they work are the same again across all humans. The exact way that it shows up might be different, or the triggers might be different, and the way it shows up, or the mechanism is exactly the same. And so I think my experience is that there's more and more veterans that are seeing, uh, yeah, maybe I'm not broken, or this is it's normal, and
Mhm.
not, normal in quotation marks. It's like, this is not abnormal. This is a human thing. It's a human thing to be with that. And so because it's a human thing, and because there's those similarities, there's practices that absolutely people can do. And the the a couple that I'll walk us through. The first one um is to practice uh getting ground under us, getting our uh, getting ground under us. Because a lot of times, what happens if we get angry, the energy can come up and out,
Mhm.
and there's no ground underneath. So the first thing that I teach is just to wiggle the toes, bring the attention back down to the feet. Because if we're sitting or standing, that's what's connecting to the ground. So just wiggling the feet can help to bring us down, and feel our ground again. So that's the one of the things. I also teach improv, and that's the like the second thing after I talk about what's good touch and bad touch. Bathing suit areas. That's the first thing I talk about uh, with teaching an improv class, and then the next thing is, feel your feet. If you're ever like stressed, or you're not, you're angry, you're mad, whatever, and you don't want to be, just feel your feet, bring yourself back down. Or a lot of times or it can be self-judgment. Oh, I'm such a piece of crap. I fell into this hole again. How could this happen? Um,
Mhm.
Wiggling the toes and feeling the feet is one thing. And another one, a centering practice or a recovery practice, just like with PT, right? Do PT out there in the mornings with the unit. in the military, and whoever's up front leading, the PT leader you do a set of exercises and then they yell recover or recover.
Mhm.
And that's the same kind of thing. It's that opportunity to reset ourselves before we go into the next exercise. We take a pause and collect ourselves back up, and then we move into the next exercise. So if you want, I can walk us through a 30-second centering practice right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. So we'll just get comfortable sitting where we are. You don't have to sit any particular way. Just feel your feet on the floor. Taking normal breaths. And we'll inhale up the back, lengthening the spine. Exhale down the front, softening the chest. You can do this with the eyes open or closed. No matter where they are, you can look to the left. Just knowing that there's space, taking in what's around us. We're going to think of something that makes us smile. We're going to expand out, imagining there's like a big soap bubble that completely surrounds us. Big bubble, and we're going to imagine we're going to push that out just a few inches. Just put our arms by our side, straighten our arms to our side, straighten our fingers, just add a little bit more space between the arm and the side of the body. And settle. And yeah, I'm curious, how was that? What was that experience like for you?
Oh, it was pretty good. It reminds me of like a breathing technique. I don't know if you have an Apple Watch, but every now and then it's like, hey, take a minute, do a minute of breaths.
Yeah.
It just disconnects you from, I guess, whatever life has got in front of you, and then just gives you an opportunity to just recalibrate, be present with yourself and check in with yourself.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for the report back. Yeah, absolutely. All the things that you just mentioned, being present, being the recovery practice or centered operating system is present. It's presence. It's being in the moment. And that this is, I took a little bit longer with this one, with a little bit more instruction, but the general centering practice is about 30 seconds. Mm-hmm. So it's, and sometimes I have clients who come in and say, I don't have time to do this centering nonsense. I don't have time for this recovery stuff. And I was like, okay, well, do you have a minute a day? 30 seconds twice a day? And they're like, yeah. And so I say, okay, great. So attach it to something, to a practice that you already do. Like some people brush their teeth twice a day. So brush, do the centering practice before brushing the teeth or after brushing teeth in the morning, or do it right after getting out of bed and right before going to bed. And this practice it helps to settle the nervous system on its own. Yeah, it's simple and it's surprisingly powerful if a person practices it. Yeah, 1 minute a day for say 45 days. And I do it in line at the grocery store. Anytime I have to wait somewhere, because I'm a human and sometimes I get impatient. So, I do it in line at the grocery store. Sometimes I'll do it when I'm driving. I live in San Francisco, so, there's traffic. Although I don't drive in a car that often, when I do, I just throw in a little centering practice. It doesn't have to be fancy, and there's no right way to do it. It's like, can I practice that shift?
Right. I agree. Being present in the moment, it's beneficial in many situations. I like to train jiu-jitsu, and a lot of times you can get overwhelmed. And the ones that I feel like are better at it or have more experience with it, you tell, like, no matter what position they're in, no matter how dangerous or, like overwhelmed it may seem, they're always calm breathing. They're all collected. They're present in the moment, and it's like, that's where I'd like to be all the time too.
Yeah. So, oh, that's a great, so many, such great richness in that. The last thing that you just said, I'd like to be there all the time. And
Mhm.
it's a subtle word shift. So what you said, it's not wrong. And another way to look at that is, instead of trying to be centered all the time, because that can lead to grasping and holding on to, like, oh, I don't want to
Mhm.
get knocked off center, so I hold on to it, which creates tension. It's, oh, I got knocked off. Let me bring myself back to center. And because
Right.
every human, including the Dalai Lama gets knocked off center too. It's just that he's practiced the recovery so many times from the age of like 4 or 5. He's practiced it so many times that most people they never notice that he gets knocked off center, because he comes back so quickly. So instead of trying to hold on to it, it's, oh, I got knocked off, let me bring myself back. And it sounds similar. It sounds like what your those the folks who are you're doing jujitsu with, who have been practicing it longer.
Mhm.
That is that word again, practicing it longer, it's embodied in them. They don't have to think about it as much. The practice of recovery is embodied in them. It's in the tissue. It's not coming from the brain. It's like it's moving from muscle memory.
Right. Absolutely. So centering is an important aspect of leadership embodiment. Being aware of the body and what you're feeling seems to be another.
Mhm.
What would be like the next step in the evolution of leadership embodiment?
I would say, well, there's a number of other practices that can be done that are not, they're just a little bit too, they're not complicated, and it's harder to explain without visual
Right.
so that somebody can see it. And I can talk about a couple of things that don't require the visual. So another big component of leadership embodiment is, like you said, it's first is awareness, because if we're not aware, then we can't change anything. So we've got to bring it to our awareness, and then practice. Another big piece is meditation, which, just like 30 seconds for centering practice, does a person have a minute a day to do the centering practice. And with meditation is the way it's taught with leadership embodiment, and the way I teach it with my coaching practice, is it's also a practice in recovery, recovery and recenter. And that one I can talk about here on the podcast.
Okay.
And it's as simple, the meditation sometimes, often, or sometimes with clients, it's either it's too weird to them, it's something they've never experienced, so they're like, I don't really know what this is, and it sounds complicated, and it can be real easy. And so I start clients off with sitting for 1 minute, still and quiet. That's it. Sit for 1 minute and just sit there and see what happens.
Mhm.
And sometimes folks say that's too much. Usually a minute is a good place to start, and people can sit for a minute. And then I say, practice that 3 times, just 3 times in a week, and that's it. And then once they can do it 3 times in a week, doesn't matter if they do it more than 3 times, but 3 times for the week, then add a minute to it. So the next week, it's 2 minutes 3 times a week. And the practice is to notice when thoughts come up. Practice when thoughts come up. And because we're humans, if we're not thinking, we're dead. So it's not about the absence of thoughts. It's about noticing the thought and letting it go by. And so, uh, it could be, and then there's like different, you can pretty much categorize thoughts into about, I don't know, 6 or 7 different bins. Like, oh, I'm judging myself or somebody else right now. I'm planning. Those are my 2 favorite, judging and planning. So if I notice a thought and I can just say, oh, I'm judging, and just let the thought sail by like a duck, right? Like a duck. We can just let the duck sail by. The thoughts are like ducks. Just let the duck fly by. We don't have to, we get to choose. We can always have a choice, even if we don't realize it. We always have a choice about what thought we engage with, even with our own thoughts. We can let them sail by like ducks. So yeah, planning, judging, ruminating, reminiscing. There's others, and so it's a practice of like, oh, what are my thoughts that are the most common ones that I have, and do I want to engage with them, or do I want to let them go by? Same thing with emotions too, which yeah, so that's a simple, not necessarily easy meditation practice, is to just to sit with our thoughts and let them go by. And if we notice we're going off somewhere, just bring ourselves back to our center. Just bring ourselves back to, you can pick a point on your body. Some people do it like the center point of the body, just below the belly button, look at the belt line. Other people will come back to a sensation. They'll wiggle their toes, come back to their feet.
I noticed some do breathing, whether the breath on the lip or the nostrils.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. There's so many different ways to do it, and none of them are wrong. And this is the way. Yeah. This is how I like to teach it, because I think it breaks it down to like just the basics of it. So yeah, breathing works super well for that. Absolutely.
So is it safe to say that the meditative practice is to, I guess, help with awareness as well as just recentering when you're aware that you're off your centered self?
Yeah. Yes. It's all that, both of those. It's recentering and building our awareness of what our thought patterns are.
Okay. Is there any type of meditation that you would suggest once they get comfortable with that 1 minute? Or is it just, I'm trying to think, I don't know. There's so many different types of meditations, as well as there's apps. There's like, what direction would you guide them toward next?
Oh yeah. So what I would say is, yeah, so the goal is, thank you for the follow-up on that, because I left out an important piece, which is the goal is to build up to 20 minutes. This is how I present it, is build up to 20 minutes 3 times a week meditating. And once a person gets to that point with noticing their thoughts and things, then I invite them to explore out and maybe do try guided meditation. Maybe go to find a place that does meditation in person in their community, or Zoom. There's plenty of stuff on Zoom, but maybe join somebody else and see how they do it differently, because there are so many different flavors of meditation. Yeah, I absolutely support the exploration, right? Because that's what life is, just a big experiment. Everybody's life is a big experiment. We're all trying to figure out how to make our way through this, and we're all trying to do the best that we can. And so, yeah, I like to make it an experiment. Let's play with this. Let's see what happens.
Right. One that I spoke to recently that I thought was pretty good, I think it was the David Lynch Foundation. They do transcendental meditation. I think they might be either in LA or San Francisco is one of their 3 stops. But they have a program just for those who are listening. It's free, for veterans. And they give out scholarships for other people too, if you're interested. And I find that that's useful, as well as I use the Calm app. My friend Josh wasn't too enthusiastic about my selection of app because, he's more of like really deep, long meditation, whereas I find benefit in like the short, punchy, as long as I'm consistent every day.
Yeah, that's great. There's nothing. What do I want to say about that? I have not trained in transcendental meditation, and I'm glad to hear that it's free through the David Lynch Foundation. My philosophy on meditation is that it doesn't need to cost anything, and that some organizations, and I don't know enough about transcendental meditation. I will just
Right.
make a general claim about there are some organizations out there that say there's only one way to meditate, and you have to come to our program and you have to spend a lot of money to learn how to meditate the quote unquote right way.
Right.
And I don't have a problem. Like personally, I give dana, which is in Buddhist tradition is the giving of like a gift of money to the teacher and to the facility that's running it, instead of, it's a donation, as opposed, and it's reasonable, it's whatever, $20 for an hour, or some $15-20. It's based on need. The idea, my point is, there's plenty of free ways or ways that are not super expensive to learn how to meditate. So there is no one right way. And that's just something that I wanted to throw out there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I find that, I guess, an interesting idea when people are like, this is the one and only solution, because in my opinion, that just alienates a lot of people,
Yeah.
I think we're all different, one might work for you, one might not, I do find that there's different types of meditation. Some's external, like where you're trying to like disconnect from yourself. Whereas for me and my issues are all internal. So I actually want to go inside myself to see, what's going on. Like, what kind of feelings am I feeling? How am I reacting emotionally? How's my body reacting to those emotions? Just being self-aware of where I'm at physically. Because oftentimes when I'm having negative thoughts, feelings, or just not feeling great, it's usually a red flag that something in my world, my life needs attention, and I'm ignoring it.
Yes. Yeah. That's absolutely, that's 100% what I have found to be true. Like our body's always trying to communicate with us and tell us something. So if it's not working the way that it's optimally designed to, our body will tell us, we'll get knee pain or low back pain or anything, or even, like shaking or anger that's coming out. That's our body saying like it's not functioning optimally. And how long have you been meditating, Jonathan? I'm just curious. Or how was the experience for you? Was it like an easy thing to get into? Did it take time?
It was a weird, I feel like meditation, as well as a few other things that I've tried, it just was an idea popped into my head and I was like, I should try it. I remember talking with my brother one trip back to Tennessee, and I was like, man, I really want to try meditation. And he's like, well, that's weird, because I'm from the South, like the idea of meditation is very like hippie, and like it's out there. But I don't want to alienate people in suggesting that meditation is the only way, because if you're religious and, prayer, in my opinion, is an example of meditation, things of that nature. Or even I think my mom does like reading the scripture, in my mind, I feel like that's another example of something that's very close to meditation. So I started that probably about 6 years ago. And for me, what it helped me do is realize, I don't know, a lot of veterans go 0 to 10. You'll hear that expressed a lot, like, oh, I went 0 to 10, I just have a quick fuse. When I started meditating, I realized I was always at a 10 or like close to, like I was already ready all the time. So once I started meditating, I was like, oh, wow, like I'm I'm stressed. So I was able to like de-escalate that and decompress. And, that led me down ways to like figure out how to decompress in a healthy way. And for everybody, it's different. For me, I'm really cerebral as well as physical. So it was anything to involve like cardio did it for me, because it gets it out, gets that energy out, as well as gives me an opportunity to think while I'm processing that stuff. Jiu-jitsu is another one for me. I like working out. I just spoke with a lady, Susie Landrolfi, and she was explaining how like the quickest way to heal the mind is actually to lift heavy weights. And I was like, wow, that's pretty interesting, because I find that it's really therapeutic for me to lift heavy weights, and that's just the evolution of it. And I realized that meditation gave me the opportunity to give myself 2 to 3 seconds to react, instead of just immediately reacting to a situation. I was able to like catch myself, and prevented me from doing things that I regretted, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. There's so many things in that I find interesting, and I'll just go with the at the end of, it's that all we're trying to do with meditation and noticing thoughts and the recovery or the recentering practice is to just add that little bit of pause, so we can shift from a reaction, which is like, I'm not even aware that I'm at 10, and now I've gone to like, I'm even past 11. I'm at like 12. And just brief pause, or like pushing in a clutch, to allow that more conscious part of the brain to be like, oh, wait a minute, I can choose here. And I'm going to choose a different way. I'm going to choose to respond instead of the react to the with the old reaction.
Right. When you say that old reaction, that's going to bring me back to patterns. And you've mentioned a couple of times practice, and that's something that resonates with me, because I feel like when I started seeing issues with my PTSD, looking back now that I'm aware of what those issues are, I see what I would do in response to negative emotions. And that created a pattern, and it wasn't a good pattern. It was negative. If I was stressed, I drank. If I was feeling aggressive, I'd go pick a fight with a Marine at a bar. It was like there was always these negative patterns that I did, and I could go on forever for what they are. But at some stage, I became self-aware of these negative patterns, and I was like, okay, well, now I want to implement healthy patterns, which I find is just as easy to do. Maybe not just as easy. It's as easy as doing negative patterns. It's just making a conscious choice, being like, okay, instead of drinking, I'm going to meditate. Instead of doing this, I'm going to exercise, but with the length of the pattern, I've been doing the negative patterns for almost 20 years. And I feel like the positive stuff I've only been doing for like 6. So it's a little bit easier to slide into those negative patterns, but almost like what you said about meditation, like becoming self-aware that you're off center, off kilter, or in this example, being aware that you're slipping into the negative pattern, then you could quickly come back to the positive. And I like that. And I was wondering if you have any ideas of or just thoughts on doing positive patterns and increasing that benefit.
Yeah. I would say that, that train, like each of us has a train, and it's been like the pattern train's been going down the tracks for, a long time, for years, 10, 20, 30 years, however long, for everyone. And you can't just stop a train, does not stop on a dime. Like it takes, I don't know how long it takes to stop a train, but it's like half a mile or more to stop a train, because it's got so much momentum behind it. And so it's slowing down and saying like, okay, let's choose a different way. And the patterns, like for me, I tended not to fight. I was more like I would hide out. And so everybody has their different ways in which they it's a defense, or it's a safety mechanism, right? Like, so, and this is not directly related to your question, and it's related to PTSD. I'm not a fan of the term PTSD, because to me, it's not a disorder. It's post-traumatic stress order, because the body is actually functioning the way that it's supposed to. It's designed to do this. It's designed to, when there's an overwhelming, when overwhelm happens, that the emotions or the whatever the physical movement that's trying to occur gets shut down and gets shoved away and stored somewhere in the body, so that the human can still function. So on a battlefield, like, it's a very helpful and useful mechanism, because it's a battlefield, man. It's like, it's war. There's blood and carnage, and there can be periods of, calm, and then all of a sudden, like, everything goes crazy. So, and I want to be clear, I have not actually been in combat. I was in the Air Force, and I still have PTSD from being over in the desert, carrying weapons outside the wire, that kind of thing. Never shot at. So just want to be clear about that. And so yeah, PTSD, post-traumatic stress, is actually, it just that emotion or that movement gets stuck, and it was never allowed to express. And so then coming back, all these patterns can keep coming back up, unless we learn that, there is another way. There's another way, and it can work for every person who has PTSD. And a general rule of thumb is that and this is not a judgment, it's the reality, is that everybody, unless a person has self-awareness, they don't know if they're in their pattern. So it's safe to assume they're probably in their pattern a lot. That was my experience personally. And yeah, right. Yeah. Like, we're just in our pattern because we don't know, because we're not aware, and it's not because we're bad people. It's because nobody ever taught us. This isn't taught in schools. I shouldn't say any schools. It's the vast majority of humans don't learn this. It's not taught in elementary school, like math and reading and all the other, social studies and science. It's not taught. So when so it makes sense that veterans come out and they have this post-traumatic stress, which again is not new. I mean, thousands of years ago, they saw that this was a recognized thing, different names. And now we're really getting into the giving useful skills, that actually practical skills that work to more and more veterans, so they don't have to be in this. And the stigma, removing part of it, to me, is removing that stigma that it isn't a disorder, it's an order. It just is, like, it's just post-traumatic stress, which, not to say like that can be terribly, it's horrible, because I lived through it. I went through it myself, and all the drinking and the overeating and the terrible things I said about myself, like I'm a horrible piece of crap, and all that. So I want to say there's hope too. Like, this isn't all this is terrible, and it's not something somebody has to live with for the rest of their life.
Right. If you were to go back to your younger version of yourself, what are some things that you would implement with the knowledge that you have now to improve your quality of life quickly?
What would say that one more time? What would I do back then?
If you had all the knowledge you have now, and you were able to go back to like the early days of when you first started seeing issues of PTSD, what are some things that you would implement into your life to raise the quality of your life quickly?
Yeah, I would go back. I would actually go back to childhood, like 5 years old, and I would teach myself. How to center, or how to recover. I would teach myself the recovery practice. That's the very first thing. And there's another one. It's part of what I call, or it's something that I borrowed from improv. and it's yes and in improv, which I also am an improv performer and I teach improv, which is about being present, which also is a leadership embodiment, is about being present. So the recentering practice, yes and, which is something happens in life and I say yes to it. And in improv, we would add something. So if you said to me, hey, Mike, let's go to the beach, I would say yes, and I will bring a blanket. Now, if you said to me, hey, let's go rob a liquor store in an improv scene, I want to acknowledge the yes is not agreeing to what you just said to me. So I'm not going to say, yes, let's go rob a liquor store necessarily. And I'm saying yes to the fact that that's the reality, is that you just said this to me. And I might respond with, I could say yes, and I don't need to do that today. So it's about acknowledging reality and accepting reality. That's also a practice of acceptance. So it's recentering, accepting reality as it is another thing that I would teach. And to quickly, I would say play. Allowing ourselves to play in whatever form that is as an adult. Like play to me is such an important thing because it invites more ease to play. And as adults, like it's just not that there's a lot of messages about play. It's not okay for adults. Like you work hard, maybe you play hard, but it's not okay to play at work. And I would say I don't think that's true. I don't think that's healthy, and I don't think it's true. So I would say inviting more play in whatever that form looks like. It might not look like, going out and playing on the merry-go-round as a 40-year-old or swinging on swings, although those are two things that I have actually done for myself and with clients. And it's amazing the transformation that it can do in like 5 minutes of swinging on a swing. It's like, oh yeah, man, there's a reason why kids do it, because it's fun.
Yeah.
I would list maybe those three: play, centering, yes, and accepting reality, and the meditation would be the fourth one. Is a couple minutes of meditation. I meditate now for about 20 to 30 minutes a day, but just easy, just like go out there and play with life, experiment.
Yeah, no, I like it. We didn't hit on this at the beginning, but I'm curious, what got you involved in LE?
Yeah, the short version is I was active duty for 14 years, and then they sent me to the Pentagon. And I said, I was officer, I retired as a lieutenant colonel. And so they sent me to the Pentagon, and I was like, this is not working for me. Like, it just was not my scene. And I loved the Air Force up until that moment. And I was like, I cannot, if this is going to be my life for the next, 6+ years, I'm like, I'm not doing that. So I went into the reserves, and I went to Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. has a coaching program, a leadership coaching program. Turns out it's one of the best in the United States, maybe in the world, for leadership coaching. I didn't know that. I picked it because I could ride my bike there. And like so many things in my life that work out, because there's like, sometimes it feels like there's somebody guiding me. So I did that at Georgetown, and then I became a coach, and I was still in the reserves part-time. And I found out through the Georgetown Leadership Coaching Program, I found out about a place called the Strozzi Institute, which teaches somatics, which is like a cousin of embodiment. And they're out here in California, about an hour north of where I live in San Francisco. So for 6 years, I was traveling back and forth out here to get trained. From the East Coast, I would fly out here 2 to 3 times a year, get some training, and then fly back. And then through Strozzi, I found out about leadership embodiment. So it was through coaching, I found out about leadership embodiment, and it was so I really connected with it. I love Strozzi, the Strozzi Institute and Strozzi Somatics are wonderful as well. And what I really liked about the leadership embodiment was it's not just grounding. I call it grounding down and grounding up. Yeah, and it's a longer explanation, but basically the idea is we can send our energy down into the ground, or we can invite energy up from the ground to support us, give us like a strong foundation, so we can't get easily pushed over. And it's also important to send the energy up, because if it's like a tree that's all roots with no leaves it won't live. It's just a dead tree. Whereas a tree needs roots and it needs a canopy. It needs leaves. So grounding down and up. And Strozzi may have mentioned that or said that, the Strozzi Institute teachers. And they didn't teach it that way, or I didn't hear it. Yeah. But both of them both Strozzi and leadership embodiment come from Aikido. Is a big piece of that, which is a Japanese martial art.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, I saw a few similarities to leadership embodiment with like somatic experiencing and stuff like that, like the energy and presence of what you're projecting as well as what's being projected towards you, kind of thing. And I found that pretty fascinating. But I also want to say, like, I feel like the leadership embodiment that we discussed is a very basic level,
Yeah.
Eventually we'd like to maybe do another episode, but this is just to give someone who's listening an idea, like, hey, this is a basic summary of what leadership embodiment is. And then I was going to transition into, if you were to just give a super short summary and can encapsulate everything that we discussed on leadership embodiment, what would that sound like?
Wow. I can definitely. Yeah. Go ahead.
I'll throw you some tips. I was thinking, like, for me, it sounds like becoming aware of the emotions within yourself, learning how to center yourself if you find that you're off kilter or off. I'm sorry, I forgot the term that you used. There's two types.
Oh, center and pattern.
Yes.
Is that what you mean?
So, right.
Yeah.
So notice when you're into your patterns and notice when you're centered, and I like that idea of pattern, because I think of my historical patterns as negative, but I think eventually I could add positive patterns too. But I don't know. I was just trying to get like an idea similar to that. Just
yeah.
quick.
Yeah. It is. No. I got it. I was pulling it down because I'm a talker, so
right.
So yeah, I would say it's about creating awareness of our thoughts, our emotions, and our behaviors. Thoughts, emotions, and behaviors, or thoughts, emotions, and actions. Getting awareness around those three so that we can then pause and choose the response that we want. I would say, to me, like that's the nutshell. It's creating awareness of our thoughts, emotions, and behaviors so that we can pause and then choose the response that we want.
Nope. I like it. If someone was wanting to get more information, where would you send them?
Well, I would send them to, for leadership embodiment. I don't remember I think it's as simple as leadershipembodiment.com.
I think it is too.
And
yeah,
for my website, you can check me out at vetsatease.com, all run together, vetsatease.com, and you can check it out. I've got all my information out there. And if you're interested, if someone, I specialize in working with veterans.
And I'll add all this to the show notes too, so it's easy
great
for everyone to find.
Thanks. Yeah, but that's the easiest way to find more information. And I've got blog out there and all kinds of good stuff, tips and ideas to help veterans. Cause that's how I look at it, is we got to help each other. We got to help each other out.
Right. Before we wrap it up, I just want to see, is there anything that we may have missed that you want to hit on or, elaborate on further? And if we missed something and you want to come back on and, touch on it again, because I don't think I'll release this episode probably for about a month and a half, maybe. And, if there's something you're like, hey, I'd like to expound on that, you can let me know and I can just clip it in.
Yeah. What, if there's anything else that's left? A couple of things, short things. One is my big part of my coaching philosophy is that coaching and going through a transition, it can suck or it can be challenging at times, and it doesn't have to suck. Like there's a way, there's always a way to play with or invite in a little bit of joy or a little bit of adventure or experimentation into whatever it is that we do. And it makes life easier. Laughter is, a great thing. And it because laughter is an expression of energy. So if energy's stuck in our, if we've got things that are stuck somewhere, just laughing can help to release the energy. Just because I was crying or there was fear present and that was the emotion that got stuck, doesn't mean that's the emotion that necessarily has to be expressed, now in the present day. It can actually come out as laughter. So it's a great way for clients to move through their stuff, is to allow it to release with laughter. Yeah, I like it. That's the big thing, I think. Yeah. Oh, and also, I also grew up I didn't grow up in Tennessee, but I grew up in a very small town outside of Philadelphia and around farms. And so I get to the, trying to take meditation. Yeah, I grew up in the country, and people look at meditation. A lot of them still are like, what the hell is this stuff? Like, this is this crazy, stuff from wherever, somewhere in the Far East. And yeah, because that's where it comes from. And like you said, it's just like prayer or something else. So putting it into relatable terms and making it relatable so that anybody anywhere can latch onto this and say, like, yeah, this, maybe I could do this.
Yeah, I think it's anything that makes you present in the moment.
Yep.
It doesn't have to have a label or a name or a title.
Right.
Just slot some time. You could do it like you do in the grocery store line, waiting, traffic, waiting. I like to do it like either running or after exercise, take a time out, just be present in the moment, see how I'm doing. I also like to use that as an opportunity to schedule out my day and be like, okay, so what things do I feel like I need to get accomplished today? And then once you have, like, I find, like, if I don't put boundaries or walls on my problems, they feel way bigger than they really are. And then once I'm actually able to conceptualize what's bothering me, it's really small normally. And it's like, okay, and just knock it out and you're done with it. And then after that, I'm like, oh, well, that was pretty easy. But before that, if I don't do that, then I feel overwhelmed and exhausted and stressed. And it's like, that's one of my favorite things about meditation, is being able to, like, put limits on the stress.
Yes, absolutely. Right. Yes. Putting limits on it, put a container around it. And that's in improv. So people, if even if they've never watched improv, they might have watched Whose Line Is It Anyway? And it's not, improv is not scripted. And that doesn't mean it's anarchy and chaos. There's still a container, there's a format, there's a basic format that all the performers who walk out on stage know what that format's going to be. So they can follow the beats of, like, they can follow the beat of the show for however long it is, 30 minutes, an hour. So, and even the absence, saying we're not going to have, there are no rules, we're not going to have any plan for the format, where that's still a plan, that's still a container around it. It helps to hold it, just like you were saying, and it makes it less daunting, it's less scary. It's like, oh yeah, I can totally do this, right? Which is also a practice. Yeah, so it's just amazing. And yeah, what a great what a great podcast. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, thank you for joining. And with that, we'll wrap it up.
We're going to wrap it up right there. Hope you enjoyed it. Found it a really interesting conversation, and I'd really appreciate a like and a share. And if you ever have any questions or want to have any discussions, just shoot me a DM on any social media platform that we're on. And yeah, I guess that's about it. If you're a veteran, first responder, or you know anyone that you feel like has a powerful story that you would like us to hear, I'd appreciate the connection and chat with you soon. All right.